The stars above the galactic rim shimmered with quiet indifference, ancient and vast, uncaring of the petty struggles of rising empires, but deep within the Orion sector, that silence was broken by war. The NIGMA Empire, a ruthless and calculating race of serpentine beings with shimmering silver scales and 4 golden eyes, had swept through 5 star systems in under a decade, leaving behind broken treaties, burned planets, and enslaved species too weak to resist. Their empire expanded like a cold virus, patient and methodical, absorbing culture after culture, feeding on their technology, learning their weaknesses, and leaving behind only the bones of civilizations that once thrived. When they first heard of Earth, a blue planet spinning around a single yellow star, located on the outer rim of a quiet spiral arm, they barely blinked. Humanity was young, they said, barely a century into its spaceflight capabilities, with ships that could barely bend space and no record of interstellar battles. Their council reviewed intercepted transmissions from Earth satellites and called it a primitive race full of loud music, strange animals, and misplaced confidence. Yet to maintain the illusion of diplomacy, the Galactic Assembly demanded that Earth be given a chance to speak. Reluctantly, the NIGMA agreed to accept a single envoy ship from Earth, if only to silence the whispers among the stars that warned, in hushed tones, of human unpredictability. The ship, sleek and black, with no visible weapons, arrived at the NIGMA capital without fanfare. Aboard it stood Ambassador Reva Carter, a woman of calm resolve and piercing eyes, who stepped into the cold silver halls of the High Council and delivered a single message: "We ask for peace, but if attacked, humanity will respond with finality. You will not get a second warning." Her words echoed in the chamber like a whisper in a tomb, but the high speaker of NIGMA, a massive figure coiled upon a throne of platinum, hissed with laughter. "You speak as if you hold power," he said, flicking a claw dismissively. "We have broken stronger. You are a shadow not yet cast." Then, without ceremony, they ordered her ship destroyed. Not in secret, but on live broadcast across dozens of star systems. Plasma beams tore through its hull as it left orbit, slicing it into glowing fragments. The NIGMA called it a lesson. Humanity called it a line crossed. Back on Earth, the footage played once and was never shown again. There were no speeches, no declarations of war, no rallies or flashing lights. Instead, Earth fell silent. Communications from Sol ceased. Outposts went dark. Human ships vanished from known space. Galactic observers thought perhaps humanity had retreated, that fear had gripped their leaders. But then, something strange happened. Asteroids near NIGMA borders began to vanish, whole belts stripped clean overnight with no mining ships detected. Stargates along trade routes shut down mid-transit, collapsing into static without damaging nearby systems. Planets near the border, once teeming with NIGMA settlers, stopped responding to calls. At first, NIGMA officials believed it was a technical issue or sabotage by one of the broken species they'd conquered, but when scout ships were sent, they did not return. One final transmission from the scout Ilkar-17 showed a black shadow streaking across space faster than light, then only static, and a chilling voice in Terran Standard: "You should have listened." Panic began to take root in the lower ranks of the NIGMA military. Officers whispered about ghosts in the dark, ships appearing where none should be, and colonies erased as if plucked from reality. The High Council, still confident, dismissed these as superstition. They doubled patrols, deployed heavy cruisers, and demanded the surrender of Earth. But Earth said nothing. Humanity did not answer. No threats, no broadcasts, just silence. And that silence felt heavier than any fleet. An entire NIGMA colony, Dravax 3, went offline next. No alarms, no warning. Satellites caught the last recorded image, the colony. Lights winking out all at once like candles in a windless room, followed by the arrival of a dark human ship, shaped like a blade and silent as death. In a hidden observatory far from conflict, an alien archivist named Reltav watched these events unfold with growing dread. He had studied human history, their wars, their brutal rise through their own self-made chaos, and what troubled him was Not their weapons, it was their restraint. Humanity knew how to fight, but more than that, they knew how to wait. They didn't strike like invaders, they erased like mathematicians. Every move was calculated, not to conquer, but to leave behind an example. And now, with each missing colony and ghost transmission, a pattern was forming. Earth was not responding emotionally, it was answering strategically, with finality and precision. Back in NIGMA space, High Admiral Zerkaloon began to see it too. He had survived 5 wars and lost a brother to Terran ground troops during a forgotten border skirmish 30 years ago. He remembered the human infantry, how they moved in silence, how they never celebrated a kill, how they only ever fought when pushed. He begged the Council to reconsider, to open talks again, to seek peace. "You don't end what you can't understand," he warned, but his voice was drowned out by pride. The Council declared the silence a bluff. They sent another fleet to Earth's edge. None returned. Even their signals vanished the moment they entered Sol's approach path. Then came the image. A NIGMA warship, one of their finest, drifting through space with its power core surgically removed, its crew unconscious, but unharmed. Painted across its hull in Terran steel letters was one message: "We warned you." It was not revenge. It was not chaos. It was a lesson. A final one. And the galaxy, watching from afar, began to understand. Humanity had not been silent out of fear. They had been silent because they were calculating the most efficient way to remove a threat, not from a battlefield but from the future. Admiral Zerkaloon stood at the edge of the NIGMA command chamber, his golden eyes watching a hologram of the border sector dissolve into static as another fleet disappeared without a trace. And though no one spoke of fear aloud, the silence between the officers was heavier than any battle he'd known. The enemy was not firing weapons or demanding surrender. They were simply making things vanish, cleanly and without warning, leaving behind no debris, no escape pods, no survivors, only empty space where entire outposts had once glowed with life. And to the proud NIGMA, who had always fought enemies that screamed, fled, or begged, this enemy's silence was far worse. The Council still called it coincidence, still believed Earth was too small, too backward, too human to stand against a mighty empire like theirs. But Zerkaloon knew better, for he had seen the change in the stars, the way gravity felt, heavier near dead zones, how patrol ships returned different if they returned at all, their crews pale, eyes darting like prey that had sensed a hunter too large to fight. In one case, a NIGMA pilot was found alone in a returning cruiser, repeating the same words over and over. "They're in the dark," before collapsing into unconsciousness, and every scan showed no physical wounds, no signs of struggle, only extreme neurological stress, as if his mind had seen something it could not explain. Reports of strange shapes drifting in the void spread like a quiet sickness, too fast to be natural, too large to be asteroid fragments, and moving without heat, without noise, without identity. NIGMA engineers tried to track these objects, but sensors malfunctioned every time they came close, as though the enemy could blind their systems at will. Whole relay stations near the frontier began broadcasting corrupted signals, warped voices, fragments of human music, and sometimes even whispers in the NIGMA language, messages that made no sense, but carried a tone of warning, of waiting, of inevitability. Then, on the third moon of Grenthos 9, a mining outpost received an unscheduled supply ship with no crew aboard, and only a single crate in its hold. Inside the crate was a basic Earth datapad showing a looping video of a quiet Earth city at night. People walking peacefully under streetlights, no tanks, no soldiers, no weapons, just life. And below it, text in perfect NIGMA script: "This is what we protect." "What are you protecting?" The miners evacuated themselves within the hour. Zerkaloon took command of 3 elite strike groups and sent them to investigate the disappearance zones, but only one returned, and even then, its hull was scorched, in patterns that resembled ancient Terran warning symbols, radiation-free, untraceable, as if they had been burned not by heat, but by pure intent. The survivors refused to speak. One wrote a single sentence in their report before vanishing. "From the medical bay, We were not meant to see what's hiding in the dark. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the galaxy, unaligned species began receiving ghost messages from anonymous frequencies, warnings written in old Earth languages, offers of non-interference, and clear messages that read, "This is not your fight, but know who you stand with." The Galactic Assembly, previously neutral, began to split. Some species pulled ambassadors from NIGMA space, others shut down trade routes. Quietly, Earth's silence had begun to shift the balance of power. On a distant moon, a research team uncovered a strange black shard embedded in an ancient rock face, clearly artificial, pulsing softly with low-frequency sound. The scientists studied it for days before it suddenly displayed a three-dimensional image of the NIGMA homeworld, surrounded not by ships, but by concentric rings of unknown energy, defensive patterns no one had ever seen, surrounding nothing. And then, a countdown appeared. 30 cycles. No one knew what would happen when the countdown ended, but fear crept in fast. Back in NIGMA Central Command, panic began to slip through the cracks. Trade sectors reported equipment malfunctions in synchronized patterns, and when they tried to call for technical support, their systems would crash with one phrase burned into the screen. Your system is no longer yours. What made it worse was the quiet precision. There was still no open attack, no demand, no visible fleets, just control slipping slowly, perfectly, like a dream turning into a nightmare. Zerkalun gathered his senior officers in secret and told them the truth. Earth was not a weak race playing war. They were a patient species playing the long game, and every vanished ship, every silent outpost, every strange frequency was part of a coordinated operation far beyond NIGMA military design. Earth was not winning the war. They had already won. The rest was cleanup. He warned the Council that further aggression would not bring fear to Earth. It would bring something else, something worse. But his warnings were dismissed again, and they deployed their largest fleet, Armada Veilbreaker, to launch a preemptive strike on Seoul. This time the galaxy watched in suspense, their broadcasts, tuned in to see what humanity would do when faced with overwhelming force. But Veilbreaker never reached its destination. Halfway through their faster-than-light jump, all ships vanished from sensors, and a moment later, every stargate within 2 sectors imploded in perfect harmony, leaving behind nothing but dust, and one final message pulsed through to every listening. Station in a cold, clear voice, "You entered our shadow. You do not get to leave." This was no longer a game. The NIGMA were not dealing with warriors. They were dealing with shadows in the void, and as more colonies failed to respond, more transport lines collapsed, and more evidence of human manipulation surfaced. A realization began to dawn. Humanity had not disappeared after the envoy's death. They had simply stepped back into the dark to prepare. And now, they were everywhere, unseen but always near, watching, calculating, removing threats, one silent step at a time. The NIGMA, once feared by all, now found themselves on the defensive, not because their enemy had struck, but because it had erased the rules of engagement. In the quiet of deep space, near the broken hull of a NIGMA freighter drifting silently past a dead star, a small human probe unfolded its wings, absorbed starlight, and sent a final encrypted signal back to Earth. Phase 2 complete. They still do not understand. Proceeding. Admiral Zerkalun stood alone in the lower war chamber beneath the NIGMA High Citadel, watching the flickering star map as more systems turned dark, their signals cut off, their colonies gone silent like distant candles snuffed out one by one, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something that NIGMA warriors were taught to never admit: doubt. The Empire was breaking, not from an attack they could see or fight, but from something quieter, colder, and far more dangerous, and it was spreading from within, starting with whispered questions in mess halls, confused messages from outposts, and captains refusing orders, and now entire fleets were turning their ships around mid-mission without explanation, claiming strange visions, failing navigation, or ghost signals in their systems, and the Council still refused to believe that anything serious was happening, blaming malfunctions, sabotage, or panic among the lower ranks. But Zerkalun Knew better, because he had seen what the humans were doing. This was not an invasion. It was isolation, disconnection, and fear turned into a weapon. Deep inside NIGMA space, the fractures were widening. On the industrial world of Vexari Prime, a reactor core went offline after a routine diagnostic scan suddenly triggered an emergency shutdown, and when engineers opened the panel, they found a single Earth coin embedded inside, impossible, untouched by heat and spinning in place as if defying physics. On the prison moon Charanta 6, the lights failed for 7 minutes, and when they returned, every cell door was open, every prisoner asleep, and every camera wiped clean except for one final frame showing a shadow in the shape of a human, staring directly at the lens, face hidden. No alarms were tripped, no guards hurt, just control. Gone. Council Speaker Zalcorin ordered the arrest of any officer who mentioned Earth as a threat without proof, trying to control the fear like one might hold back the ocean with their hands. But too many had already seen too much, and now even high-ranking commanders were secretly sending encrypted messages to allies and rivals alike, asking if they had noticed the changes, if they had seen the signs, if perhaps the galaxy had misunderstood what Earth was for all these years. And slowly a terrifying idea began to grow, that Earth had never been silent out of weakness, but out of design, like a sleeping predator waiting to be provoked. On board a drifting cargo hauler near the dead zone, a crew of 6 encountered a derelict NIGMA science vessel, its beacon still active but its course wrong, spinning slowly with no power. When the crew boarded, they found every console displaying the same Earth phrase, "We see what you are," and deep in the ship's hold, they discovered a sealed crate not on the manifest, locked from the outside with human writing burned into the sea. Steel saying only, "You broke the silence. We will not fix it." They left the crate unopened and never returned to port. Meanwhile, on Earth, there was no sign of celebration or declaration. Cities remained calm, communication still down, and no human ambassador reached out to negotiate, which disturbed even the most aggressive NIGMA generals, because it meant this campaign wasn't about revenge or conquest, it was about principle, and humans seemed to believe they were simply finishing what had already been decided. The Galactic Assembly met in emergency session, with species from across the stars arguing in quiet tones, most unwilling to speak against the NIGMA publicly, but even less willing to take their side, especially after trade routes started vanishing. Without violence, entire shipping lanes erased from maps overnight, with replacement paths emerging days later, faster, safer, but now routed through human-controlled space, even though no one had ever seen the humans take those sectors. Some races began calling it the Quiet War, a conflict where battles were won without sound, without fire, and without witnesses, and slowly, one by one, outer systems began cutting ties with the NIGMA Empire, first unofficially, then openly, refusing their envoys, turning away their patrol ships, and signing new trade compacts that included Earth, even though Earth still had not spoken. Inside the High Citadel, the council was cracking. Speaker Zalcorin accused his own second-in-command of treason after a secret report was found containing intercepted Terran transmissions, old messages about peace, about defense, about Earth not seeking control, but balance, and in a furious outburst, he shouted that humanity was not erasing the NIGMA to dominate the stars, but to protect them from NIGMA itself. The second-in-command did not deny it. He simply looked at the council with tired eyes and said, "They warned us," before walking out of the chamber and vanishing. That same night, 4 more councilors resigned, 5 warships refused orders to move, and a major weapons facility detonated itself rather than be turned against unknown threats. Zirkal-Un, watching all this unfold, prepared a final report for his personal archives, recording the truth as he saw it. Not just the failure of strategy or pride, but the failure to listen, to observe, to respect the quiet ones. As he wrote, his private terminal received a single encrypted message from an untraceable source. He opened it without hesitation. It read, "We do not hate you. We remember being you. That is why we gave you a warning." Attached was a silent video clip, his own ship, recorded from an impossible distance, floating peacefully, untouched, with hundreds of human vessels hidden in the black beyond, just watching, cloaked by the void. He stared at it for a long time. No missiles, no beams, no threats, just presence. A quiet presence so vast, it made the stars seem small. At that moment, Zirkul-Un finally understood. The war was never about power. It was about consequences. The humans had made their decision not out of anger but responsibility, and the fracture inside the NIGMA Empire was not caused by Earth. It had always been there. Earth had only held up the mirror, and now, as the fractures deepened and silence wrapped tighter around their systems like a shroud, he knew that soon the final lesson would come, not with fire, but with removal. And no one would be able to stop it. Admiral Zirkul-Un stood at the central viewport of the NIGMA command vessel, Severance of Dawn, watching the emptiness beyond the stars where the last of their deep space satellites had gone offline just hours ago, and as the holograms flickered and died one by one across the war table behind him, it became clear to everyone in the room that the Empire was now blind in half its own territory, unable to track, predict, or respond to anything beyond the veil of darkness spreading slowly from the direction of Sul. Yet still no human ships had been seen, no open message had been delivered, no declaration made, and that absence was more terrifying than any direct assault could have been, because the enemy was not attacking. They were removing, deleting, unmaking everything NIGMA touched, as if to say, "This is no longer yours." And as panic spread through the command channels, many younger officers begged for permission to fire upon anything that moved, while others simply left their posts, disappearing into quiet transports and vanishing into neutral zones, unwilling to stay for whatever came next. On Varnic Prime, a core world that once housed 1 million NIGMA citizens, a strange silence fell across the planet as local systems began to fail, not from power loss, but from over-efficiency, engines running too smoothly, systems correcting themselves before input, AI assistants refusing to obey violent commands, and then one by one, screens across the capital city all switched to the same image, a simple human face, female, calm, not speaking, just watching, blinking slowly, as if patiently waiting for someone to understand. And even though the image only lasted a few minutes, the effect was permanent. After that, the population refused to obey central orders, refused to support the war effort, and within days, the planet had declared neutrality, its own people voting to disconnect from the Empire in full. This was not rebellion. This was awakening. In the heart of the NIGMA citadel, the council finally fractured beyond repair. Speaker Zalcorin vanished during a closed-door emergency meeting, and in his place stood 3 competing leaders, each claiming control, but none with answers, while broadcasts from across the stars played a repeating Terran phrase translated perfectly into the NIGMA tongue. You were told. You were offered peace. You answered with death. This is not revenge. This is response. The message played, with no sound behind it, only the distant echo of ocean waves, something most NIGMA had never heard and could not fully understand, but it chilled them all the same. Ships in every sector began refusing docking codes from Imperial hubs, choosing instead to land on isolated moons, abandoned colonies, or trade ports recently opened by unknown operators, ones with no known allegiance, no official name, but suspiciously human architecture. The black market circuits lit up with rumors of the gray ships, vessels with no markings, moving without drive signatures, appearing out of nowhere to intercept military convoys, disable weapons with invisible pulses, and disappear again, leaving no destruction behind, only silence and a message carved somewhere on the hull. Next time, you disappear too. The strangest part was how selective these encounters were. No civilians harmed, no unnecessary damage, only precise, surgical responses to active threats, as if humanity had built a machine of justice rather than war. On the edge of the Perseid corridor, the NIGMA dreadnought Justice Unbound attempted to test this theory by baiting the shadows, broadcasting hostile threats toward Earth on all open channels, and for 3 hours nothing happened, until every light aboard flickered and died, and the crew found themselves unable to move, speak, or even think clearly, as if some force had entered their minds and simply pressed pause. When systems came back online, half the ship was gone, cut perfectly in half along its length, floating silently, while the other half drifted away unharmed, with only one new file added to the bridge computer, a digital book of Terran philosophy titled Balance in Silence. Admiral Zerkalun read it in full and found no mention of war or punishment, only ideas about restraint, power, responsibility, and the danger of waking something too large to control. He finally understood what Earth had become, not just a species, but an idea sharpened by survival, patient enough to wait, and strong enough to act without hatred. He summoned his remaining fleet captains and gave a single order: stand down. Not surrender, just stop moving, stop fighting, stop provoking, and listen. A few refused, still clinging to pride, and those few vanished within days, their ships lost, their names erased from the NIGMA archives as if they had never existed. Meanwhile, on the outer rim of former Imperial territory, smaller civilizations long oppressed by the NIGMA began receiving strange messages in their own languages, offering blueprints, food data, medical enhancements, and safe travel corridors, all anonymously, all clean, efficient, and always tagged with a symbol never seen before, 3 circles around a single black dot. Some claimed it was Earth's new mark. Others believed it was not a symbol, but a warning. The black dot was the void, the place from which humans now operated, and the circles were layers of protection for everything not yet erased. Soon, the balance shifted. Species who once feared NIGMA began protecting human interests not out of fear, but respect, and the idea of Earth as a silent guardian began to take root across the stars. But within the crumbling empire, a final debate raged. Was there any path back? Could the NIGMA ever be forgiven? Could they even contact Earth? Zerkalun did not know, but he believed the first step was honesty. So he prepared a full broadcast, not to command, not to plead, but to confess. He recorded every detail of the Empire's crimes, the silencing of Earth's envoy, the refusal to heed the warning, the arrogance that blinded them all, and at the end, he simply said, "We are not asking for peace. We are asking to stop making it worse." He launched the message into the void, no coordinates, no encryption, and waited. For days, nothing came. Then, without fanfare, his ship received a single reply, an ancient Earth recording, distorted slightly by time, but clear enough to understand. A soft human voice reading poetry about stars, about silence, about learning to listen before speaking. No threats, no promises, just words. That was the response. And Zerkalun knew it meant they had been heard. For now, that was enough. The stars over the NIGMA Empire began to dim, not from distance or age, but from silence, deep, creeping. Silence that moved through systems like an unseen fog, swallowing light, cutting power, breaking signals, and leaving once thriving colonies in stillness where voices used to echo and ships once danced through the void with purpose. And across the remains of NIGMA's fractured borders, captains whispered of a new phase, one where humanity no longer sent messages or warnings but simply erased what they considered broken beyond fixing. And now, even the bravest NIGMA commanders dared not enter those dark zones without escort. Yet none who entered returned, and those who remained began calling it the Veil, a vast area where time seemed slower, engines refused to fire, and thoughts themselves felt heavy. On the once bright capital world of Selkara 9, which had served as the cultural heart of the Empire, the lights of its 13 sky cities flickered during a clear midnight cycle, and then, without sound, the largest tower, beacon spire, collapsed, inward, not from attack or pressure, but as if the materials themselves had given up their structure, folding like paper in slow motion while millions watched in horror from the streets below. And as the dust settled, all communication devices across the planet shut off, showing only the image of a candle slowly burning out with a human word beneath it. Enough. This was no longer a show of strength. This was judgment, calm and deliberate, and as each core world of the NIGMA fell into silence, not from fire, but from erasure, the people began to realize that what they feared was not humanity's power, but humanity's certainty. The fall did not come with invasions or fleets. It came with disconnection, lights that would not turn back on, drones that refused to fly, stars that dimmed slowly day by day, and entire populations simply choosing not to resist anymore because they no longer believed in what they were resisting for. Admiral Zerkal-Un remained aboard his silent command ship in orbit over what was once a great training moon, now empty and dark, and every day he watched the nearby stars fade one at a time, always beginning with those closest to Earth's direction, and he knew there was nothing left to command, only to witness. A final council met underground on Vardeth Station, buried deep within the crust of an asteroid belt long used for hidden intelligence, where what remained of NIGMA's leaders asked each other questions they once thought impossible. Were they the villains? Had they built an empire not to protect their people but to control them? And if so, did humanity now act not out of vengeance, but duty? No one answered. No one needed to. Outside that meeting chamber, a technician named Shirel uncovered a strange signal coming through the dust storms of the nearby asteroid field. A slow, repeating pulse of sound. Not a voice, not data, just a heartbeat rhythm. And when translated to energy readings, it matched exactly the life signs of a human being. But there were no ships in the area, no planets, nothing to hide such a thing, and yet the pulse grew stronger each day, as if whatever it was had always been there and had simply chosen to let itself be found now. Shirel brought the data to her commander, who showed it to the rest of the council, and after some quiet deliberation, they sent back a single message, not asking for help or mercy, just understanding. We know now. We see what you meant. There was no reply. But that same night, a third of the stars above Vardeth blinked out, still burning, still alive, but unseen, as if wrapped in shadow, not from space, but from something closer, something personal, and the people called it the fall of light, not because the stars were dead, but because they had chosen to no longer be seen by those who would misuse them. Elsewhere, in the remains of a once powerful shipyard orbiting the gas giant El Nakr, a crew of engineers discovered that all their heavy machinery had been gently disassembled during the night. Not destroyed, just taken apart with surgical precision, with every piece sorted, labeled, and arranged into the shape of a human child curled up in sleep, a message of innocence, or maybe warning, and the gesture left them too shaken to speak. They shut down the station the next day. In distant space, explorers searching for safe passages stumbled upon entire planets, stripped of all synthetic structures, yet untouched in their nature. Forests regrown, oceans clear, skies free of satellites, and in the center of each city, once ruled by NIGMA, a single chair remained empty, facing Earth's direction, as if waiting for someone to sit and understand. By now, the empire was no longer an empire. It was a name people stopped saying. Citizens abandoned old flags, refused military drafts, and quietly began repairing the damage to their own homes, afraid to look up for fear of what might be watching. Not from hate, but from disappointment. Humanity had become something other, something old and vast and careful. Not gods, but watchers. And in this new order, there was no room for pride, only responsibility. Admiral Zerkal-Un, the last of the old commanders, recorded a final entry in his log as he prepared to shut down his vessel's main drive for good. He did not beg. He did not explain. He only said, "We forgot what it meant to be part of the stars. They reminded us. We will remember now." As his ship powered down, a small light blinked once on his console, a single reply message from the direction of Earth, containing coordinates to an unknown sector, labeled only, "For those who choose peace." He did not open it. He did not need to. He simply left it there for the future. The stars were still there, but they no longer belonged to the NIGMA. They never had. The silence was not empty. It was full, heavy, alive with meaning that words could not hold, and across what once was the NIGMA Empire, that silence stretched wider than fleets, stronger than armies, deeper than any wound ever made by war. And in this strange quiet, the survivors walked slowly through their own ruins, not chased, not hunted, but watched from far away, as if the stars themselves had eyes and long memories. Cities built to shine with steel now lay still, untouched by fire, yet hollow. And in the empty plazas where soldiers once marched, wind moved like breath through old banners no one would lift again, while orbiting satellites blinked out one by one, not destroyed, but simply disconnected, as though whoever controlled the power no longer saw a reason to keep them lit. In one such city, a child named Relka stood in the center of a crumbling monument once meant to honor NIGMA's first conquests, and she asked her mother why no one came to fix the broken lights or repair the cracked ground. But the mother only shook her head and said, "Because we don't deserve it yet." And the child, still too young to understand shame, sat down and waited, thinking maybe the humans would return if someone stayed still long enough. Far beyond her quiet city, in space where old battlefields drifted with the wreckage of ships and dreams, strange lights pulsed in impossible patterns, moving between stars like thoughts instead of machines, faster than anything NIGMA had ever built, too fast to track. And sometimes, if one listened carefully through the void, a soft humming could be heard, low and slow, like a song meant for no one but sung anyway. These were the signs of the final stage. Not war, not erasure, but something more distant and unknowable, transformation. Humanity, it seemed, had become more than just a species. They had become silence itself, not the kind that follows death, but the kind that follows understanding, the quiet that comes when words are no longer needed. On the edge of known space, at the forgotten station of Brillian's Reach, a lone NIGMA scientist named Torvek continued his work, not out of hope for the Empire, but out of pure curiosity. He had always wondered what made the humans change, what made them wait, prepare, and then strike not with rage but with discipline, and he studied every signal, every pattern, trying to find the beginning of their evolution. One day, his sensors picked up something strange, a single particle beam dancing between gravity wells in a perfect spiral, controlled with precision beyond any known technology. And at the center of that spiral, floating in the dark, was a small cube, smooth and silver with no markings, no seams, just humming gently. Torvek retrieved it cautiously, and when he touched it, a voice filled the station. Not loud, not angry, just clear and simple, speaking in the human tongue but translated perfectly into his own. "This is the last message. We will not speak again." And then the cube fell silent. But Torvek understood. The message was not a threat, it was a closing of the book. Humans had finished what they came to do, and now they were stepping back. Not vanishing, but watching, always watching. Across the galaxy, other worlds that had once belonged to NIGMA began to change. Not from attack, but from influence. AI systems began rewriting themselves, favoring peace over efficiency, choosing rest instead of expansion. Power grids rerouted to give light to homes rather than shipyards. Weapons failed to fire, not jammed, but corrected. No one knew how. Some called it magic, others said it was humanity's final act, to teach the stars without needing to speak. Back on Earth, no word came from the skies, no signals, no parades, no celebrations. The humans did not boast, did not gloat. They remained silent. But in that silence, entire civilizations reshaped themselves, afraid to provoke the watchers, but more than that, ashamed of what they had once become. In the NIGMA core, what remained of the ruling body officially dissolved, not by vote or war, but by simple abandonment. One by one, the leaders left their posts, some to farms, some to exile, some to nothing at all. The last to leave was a once proud commander named Selvek Ran, who placed his old uniform into a fire and watched it burn without blinking, whispering, "May we never forget how close we came to losing everything," and then walked into the woods without looking back. And in the end, there were no more battles, because there was no more war. Humanity had not destroyed the NIGMA. They had made them irrelevant, erased not their bodies, but their purpose. Even the name NIGMA began to fade from records, from speech, from memory, replaced by silence where once there was pride. Children were no longer taught about conquest but about balance, not about war but about consequence. In the far reaches of space, a traveler once claimed to see a massive structure, impossibly large, drifting between galaxies, shaped like a ring of light around a black core, unmoving, eternal, and he said that when he drew near he heard a voice in his mind, not human, not alien, but clear. All actions echo, even silence. He turned back. He never spoke of it again. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. The stars had changed. The silence between them now meant something. It meant that humanity had learned not just to survive, but to wait, to grow, and to judge without hatred. And as the last war faded, from memory, the galaxy entered a new age, not of peace through force, but of restraint through fear, respect, and understanding. And in the heart of that quiet, the humans waited, unseen but never absent, holding the silence between stars like a blade too sharp to draw again.